Hi, this is the Philosophical Angle program. I am your host, Chris Angle. I'm the author of 4 books on philosophy, one of which is Defining Ethics, Good and Evil. These books are free for viewing at thephilosophicalangle.com. If you like this program, hit the like button and subscribe. And you can also make comments below. The purpose of the Philosophical Angle is to examine the nature of concepts and ideas floating around in current media. And last week we did one on AOC, which inquired as to why AOC invented her little charade about the January 6th invasion of the Capitol building. And so this week we're going to have a part 2 in that. This week we're going to discover why she lied and what was her motivation and how could she do such a thing. Well, let's get started. First, let's find out the difference between the political left and the political right. If you go all the way back into history, you really only have 2 choices. You got the haves and you got the have-nots. All parties come from this division of society. Right back to the original, to a small group of tribes, there's always a chieftain, and a chieftain rises up, and later on in societies, as they grow larger, they become kings and queens, and they develop from there, and they get nobles, and they get as society develops. So when that happens, there are 5 political behavioral principles. The first is the law of the demand for good. In other words, all life seeks that which is good for it, whether you're a have or you're a have-not. You seek that which is good for you. Dictum 2. St. Augustine's principle of libido dominandi, the will to dominate, and that causes the rise of the haves over the have-nots, because there's a will within the human species, and actually in other species too, that you tend to want to dominate. And dictum 3, the have-nots are inherently not good. The haves look down upon the have-nots, and they believe that the have-nots are inherently not of a good nature. Dictum 4, noblesse oblige, and that is when in the 1800s a attitude came about amongst the nobles that developed from the haves, that they have an obligation to take care of the have-nots, to supply them with at least the basic necessity. A social network that will ensure that they can survive. And this probably comes out of the French Revolution, when the haves saw that if they keep the have-nots downtrodden to too great extent, they rise up. When they have no hope, they rise up and they destroy the haves. So this probably came about after the French Revolution, realizing that they can't make them too poor. They gotta let them live somewhat. You gotta have a basic life for themselves so that they don't rise up and cut your head off. The last dictum, which is probably not applicable in today's conversation, but the dictum 5 is Lord Acton principle, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So the haves are really the basis of the left. They are the kings, the queens, and the nobles, and the nobles have associates that are associated with them because they're the facilitators. The government bureaucrats today are the facilitators of the various governments. They're the bureaucrats that take the policies that are made and distribute those policies throughout society. And through that, they control society. And they believe that those whom they are controlling, that is the serfs, the slaves, the have-nots of society, the proletariats, that they are inherently not so good. And that's dictum number 3. And some of the left believe that the have-nots are bad because they're just of a lower class. And also there's the secondary reason is that they're just born this way. These people are just born with a bad heart, their nature is just not good. And so these facilitators, they control the have-nots through a couple different methods. And one of the ways that they do that is through control, forcible control, which is really negative knowledge plus force. And they do it through which are examples of rules and regulations. Rules and regulations are employed throughout society, and rules and regulations are examples of negative knowledge. And add into that mix, you add force, and you can control society. And an example of the have-nots controlling, another example is through motivation. They can give money away in exchange for their vote and loyalty. And that's been happening since the 1930s. And the haves will think that they are providing and should provide a social network. And this is, as we mentioned, noblesse oblige. And this control of the have-nots will tend to get worse and more oppressive over time. And that's through the Lord Acton principle, which we can talk about that in some other conversation, because it's not so applicable here in today's conversation. So these serfs, sometimes because of dictum number 1, the law of demand for the good, they sometimes want to break out of being a serf, of being a slave, of being a worker bee, a proletariat. And they want to get out, and they do break out. And maybe they invent something, and they get a breakout, and they go into the middle class. They make a little bit of money. They become successful. They're seeking that which is good for them, and they become successful at it, and they break out into the middle class. And they're tolerated by the nobles, by the kings and queens, by the government of society, because they pay taxes. So the tax base increases, and so they're tolerated. And but because the have-nots are inherently bad people and need to be controlled, they are still looked down upon. And they're still thought of as really the same class as the very low class from which they bounced out of. And the have-nots believe that everybody should stay in the lower class so that everybody is equal in every way. And because that these have-nots are inherently bad, there's no empathy for the advocate of their individual rights. And more recently, as you can see, that they are known as the deplorables. And so you have a caste system that develops from the haves, from the kings and queens. So you have the kings and queens and then you have your nobles, And the kings and queens of today are, of course, the president and his entourage, and Congress. And then you have the nobles, which are all those that live off the laws and live off the government, and they use the government bureaucrats, which are tens of thousands, to control society. And then below them, you have the middle class and the very low class, as Obama used to call it, the shovel-ready workers. And so that we have a caste system in place here in the United States. So now we're going to go to why the nonconformity deplorables are bad and sometimes inexcusable. And why is this? It's because the have-nots, as AOC did, as AOC jumped from the have-nots into the have category. And the have-nots, in this case, in January 6th, they actually did the same thing. They've jumped from the deplorable class into the have class by their going into the Capitol building. And in the case of, and that's why the Democrats call this an insurrection, because it took over their sanctum sanctorum, their holy church, their government, their place of where they create all the control of the have-nots. So AOC was summarily or suddenly dropped from the haves into the have-not class. She's running from the, or so she said, she ran from these have-nots who have suddenly become into the chamber of the haves. So this jumping out of the serf class causes a problem for the facilitators, and sometimes it causes a really bad problem if there's a violent breakout, such as the French Revolution. But in this case, it's a minor breakout, but nevertheless a very serious one. And the jump out, this jump out causes a morality problem, because the nonconformity causes an inequity in the serf class. In other words, somebody is acquiring and achieving more goodness for himself than the rest of the serf class. And therefore, this is an unethical action by these have-nots, now gone into the middle class, just as AOC did. But AOC has been accepted by the facilitator class, and so it's okay for her. But so now that she's in the facilitator class, she doesn't want to have her status inverted. So she sees that dictum number 4, noblesse oblige, has been violated. And that is that because she's now in the facilitator class, in the governmental class, creating policy. There's a contract that noblesse oblige creates, and that the facilitators and the governmental class will guarantee a minimum standard wage or living, and thus the nobles will, for that, want to receive loyalty. And so this contract has been broken, and this nonconformity by the serfs that jumped out of their serf class, the proletariat class, violates this contract, because they've temporarily come into the sanctum sanctorum, and it's a clear violation of the contract. Therefore, the haves would view this nonconformity as unethical and deplorable. And they do this because the deplorables are inherently bad people. Dictum number 3. And because the have-nots are bad and unethical, there's no need for the haves to cooperate with them. And if there's no need to cooperate with them, then it means that the haves may employ the ends justifies the means rationality in dealing with the serfs and the deplorables. Because ethics is the appropriate dispensation of respect. And we respect others in order to cooperate with them. And that's the evolutionary reason why respect has come about in our species, because it allows us to cooperate. And we cooperate in order to produce goods and services. And we produce goods and services to bring us up away from misery, which is the essence of all that is good. And therefore, since there is now no need, the ethical contract has been broken, therefore there's no need to cooperate with the have-nots. And therefore the ends justifies the means, and therefore lying is okay, because there's no need to be ethical. And you're lying in order to get to a certain end. And that means to that end is lying in creating this little fabrication in her little charade, or that she portrayed on YouTube, and was run on various TV channels. Okay, thanks for joining us. And if you like, please subscribe and hit that like button. See you next time.